Okay, so today we are going to talk about two short stories by a World War II, or rather, or more like post World War II. I think both of them were released after the Second World War in Japan by an author called Ango Sakaguchi, whom we have talked about
Mm-hmm.
in a few podcasts now. So the two essays are the two short stories rather are The Idiot, and so that's the first one, and the second one is One Woman and the War. So let's start with The Idiot. So I guess the first thing, so it was published in 1946, and the first thing, I hear a little bit of echo, but hopefully it will go away.
Sorry for that.
Yeah. So the first thing about it is the title. Like when I brought it, when I used to, I remember when I first brought it up, you said, or when I talked about it to other people like Captain Eric, you would say, not to be confused with another story. Um,
Exactly.
so which
Because I
story?
mean, compared to Dostoevsky's one, that the topic and the themes are really different. And
Yeah,
the tone and everything is really different too.
yeah. I don't know why they went with this translation. I guess it's because there isn't a proper translation. Um, because I think that the title is Hakuchi. That's H
Mm-hmm.
A K H A. You don't need to know how to spell that, but anyhow, um, which is supposed to mean something like a stupid woman, in particular. Um, yeah, I mean, basically, a woman whose head is not there. Um, so there isn't I don't know maybe because I'd heard of that other novel by Dostoevsky or whoever, some Russian. Anyway, I, I I was under the impression that this was going to be much longer than it actually then turned out to be.
Oh,
Uh,
exactly. It's something that you can read in like 45 minutes, an hour, going at your like without rushing through it.
right. I mean, if you go on YouTube and search for The Idiot by Ango Sakaguchi, um, there will you will find a quote unquote recitation um, video where it's just some guy, a professor or something, reading it out, and maybe we could try to try try to answer the questions which were meant for his class, or something.
Honestly, that introduction by him was rather interesting because it made me look at certain of those details.
Mm,
Something that it's common in both this short story, The Idiot, and One Woman and the One Woman and a War, is there is a sort of very dark cynicism about the human condition. But again, it connects with Sakaguchi's idea that needs to be a sort of rebirth through pain. Even if in the second short story it's almost like uh, a missed opportunity rather than something that really happens. The protagonist seems to be very disappointed by how things turn out to be.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, we can talk about that, but basically, she's kind of disappointed that uh,
Yes.
uh, things return to normal, and like
Mm-hmm.
this seemed like a big deal, like the apocalypse was
Mm-hmm.
coming or something.
Exactly.
I sh-
But that's more like her point of view, whereas in The Idiot you can feel pretty much Sakaguchi pointing a finger and saying something that before the war we were a virtuous and noble race, a virtuous and noble nation. We always were degenerates, and we can use this destruction as an opportunity to rebuild better. In a sense, you get the feeling, especially in the opening, how he describes the neighborhood and the people living in it, and the fact that who's saying, like, I think it's the watchmaker who says, no, no, this place always been this bad. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it, when I think some woman kills herself because her family was trying to marry her off um, to some rich businessman in his 60s or something,
yeah,
and the,
sorry, it wasn't the watchmaker, it was the tailor who says, no, to tell the truth, things have always been like this in this neighborhood, and it's like picturing this image of a filthy and vice-ridden place.
right, right.
What I like about Sakaguchi is this: he's very, very good at mixing in all his stories this sense of like there is both despair and um, cynicism together. It's like a sort of cruelty that makes you think about the conditions and like trying to say, don't put rose tinted glasses about anything because things actually are rather bad, no matter the time and the place.
Yeah, I mean, most of what we have read by Sakaguchi, including these two, came out after the war. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I wonder, like, there's one essay which he wrote, which I've read, which he wrote during the war, the one called Pearls, which is
Hmm.
an essay about some basically a suicide attack on Pearl Harbor. Before the proper attack started, some men were sent in submarines, and basically that was used. Uh, and those men knew that they were going like to die, basically.
Suicide mission,
Yeah,
yes.
and after it came out, like it in Japan, it was used as propaganda. And I guess as part of the people praising that thing. Sakaguchi also wrote about those soldiers, and I mean, he like in that essay, he wasn't as, let's say, negative, but you have to keep in mind that,
Caustic
yeah,
as
yeah, as after the war, but
so I can imagine that one was something that changed him.
but you should also we should also keep in mind that he had to deal with the censors.
Mhm.
So obviously he couldn't.
During the war.
Yeah, he couldn't like exactly come out. And come to think of it, the censors do come up in the
Yes, in the Idiot there is, I'd say a sizable chunk of it is dedicated to Sakaguchi mocking, pretty much saying both sides. Honestly, he makes fun both of the main protagonist, who's like a journalist and wishes to create something that speaks of art, etc., but is too weak to impose his will, and he also makes fun of the people above him, describing them like as dim-witted and rather content with just pretty much churning out the same propaganda over and over again and just surviving.
mm, um yeah s- so but even back during the war, like, um I don't know, I mean, it sounded like he drew a strange contrast between the soldiers and him, whereas he and his failed artist friend were just going around drinking moonshine. um
Hmm.
and mm, so like I was thinking, uh, so that's sort of a different character from the one in the Idiot. So okay, like, going back to the Idiot. Well, So it's about an idiot, quote unquote idiot woman, but mm, I mean the title is there, but it's not from her point of view.
No,
Whereas yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Whereas one woman and the voice from the point of view of the woman.
Hmm.
Um,
The big difference is, yes, um, the idiot is told in third person, exploring different characters in a more direct approach, whereas A Woman and the War, it's from the perspective of this. I think, judging by the description, she must be in her 20s, a woman in her 20s, and her very cynical and almost perverted attitude towards the war and everything that's going on around her and everyone around her.
yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, after maybe after we are done with um next week I would like to talk about the essay which Sakaguchi wrote, his quote unquote personal view about Japanese culture. He wrote an essay called A Personal View About Japanese Culture. Um, and after we talk about that, I think it might be worth it to check out that anime. Um,
Which one?
called Ango, the one called Ango, which but which is
Ah,
spelled but which is spelled UNGO.
yeah, UNGO.
Yeah, yeah. Um, because um, like for example, there's a scene of where um, a woman confesses, says that they have made the war into their toy or something, which I think probably was trying to get something from some of these stories like one woman and the
Yeah.
probably there. So the idiot is written in third person, but I mean
And it touches, let's say, the point of views of different characters, not just the main focus is on Izawa. The main
Mhm.
protagonist is young man who just finished his studies. He wanted to become a journalist, and now he's trapped in this uh, mindless cycle of having to create propaganda, new and the kind of videos that are broadcasted during a war. How to make a shelter, how to conserve water, how to avoid being caught in the blast of a bomb, etc. And he wonders if this is what art has been reduced to. And I think it's interesting because I do believe, to a degree, Sakaguchi is also making fun of him, because, like, there is a war going on, and while everything is burning around him, he wants to. This guy wishes for cinema, for cameraman and other people in his business to create art, but honestly, that would be almost impossible, no matter
Yeah,
what in the
I
situation.
yeah, I would agree with that. At least I've been reading this book called Literary Mischief, which is about basically yeah, it's about Ango and uh, well, according to the people who wrote that book anyway, Ango basically kind of made fun of the people who were oh, it's art for art's sake, that sort of crowd, who would who would be like ideologically against like joining the war or something, or who would say stuff like, "Oh, when the Americans come, we are just going to surrender." And Ango's response was something like to these authors was like that said, These people just these authors just live in fiction." That's
Yeah,
yeah,
I can imagine that.
um,
To be honest, yeah, you can feel that it's making fun of everyone sort of, for one reason or another. It's making fun of the main protagonist of Izawa's like naivete, this idea that even if the war is raging on, we can still create meaningful art. Like the best thing that you can do at the moment is survive. But at the same time, he understands why he's so frustrated with these people who are just content with merely surviving and getting a paycheck by doing the minimum that's required of them.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, he does say himself that like, when he thinks about his meager paycheck and the fact that it might be gone at any moment, like, all the stuff about art, and whatever.
Yeah, would be going out of the window. Which honestly, it's something that no matter the situation, everyone can relate to. You can have the loftiest of ideas, the loftiest of ideals, but you don't get, if you haven't got a job, if you don't get your income, if you if you cannot put food on the table and a roof over your head, doesn't matter honestly.
Mm. I mean, you kind of have to want like, so the essay kind of, so the story, the idiot sort of starts by like describing all the people in the neighborhood, uh, and
It's a very cynical, cruel take on the people, the humanity living in this place.
yeah, I mean, to the point where like, I have to ask myself like, is this real? Like, I mean, it's not like that I can't imagine that there was, some bad neighborhood like that or something,
Yes,
but
exactly. It is plausible, it is realistic, but at the same time, the tone and the descriptions are like someone of like, they are more almost jarring. They are almost like they make you feel like you stumbled again. It's something that rides that line in between a farce and almost a fairy tale again, because there are these descriptions of these people who are almost like animals in the way, the description of the like, there is this woman who got pregnant because she had relationships with all the members of the of the neighborhood association, and he describes her. She has a hatred. There is like a hen and a duck, and she cannot stand the duck and tries to run after it. And he describes her waddling in the same way, in the same kind of ridiculous way of the duck, because she's pregnant with this big belly and her butt sticking out pretty much. So yeah, there are these very almost graphic descriptions of these people who are like dehumanized to a degree and turned into animals. He describes the son of the tailor as a pig suffering from, what's the name of the sickness? It's there is the one that, oh, what's the name? Oh, come on, it's ridiculous. Tuberculosis, TB, and describes it as a consumptive pig because it's dying of consumption. That's the other name of the
well,
reveling in trying to dehumanize them as much as possible.
right, right. I mean, in One Woman and the War, I think, Nomura, the woman's lover, says that
Hmm.
he thought that people were nicer to each other because of the war. Um,
Yes, yes. It's one of the first comments that the main character makes about him. How he's saying that people, but again, and then she mocks him because, in a sense, she sees him as a very naive person. Even if he's very pessimistic about his own condition, he seems to be holding up hopes for the people in Japan, like for the people of Japan in that moment, like despite the hardship, we are trying our best to be kind to one another, whereas everything that is described by the main character of A Woman and the War seems like the opposite. Like she's very cynical. She doesn't like anyone around her. She describes there are two old men in their neighborhood. One of them she calls him the mantis, and the other one fatty.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things which was in common with both was that the characters seemed to be under the impression. So keep in mind that this came out after the war, and
Just after, yes.
the characters seem to be under the impression that once the Americans came in, like they were going to massacre literally everyone.
Yeah. Well, from what I heard, this was it's for two reasons. One, it was the propaganda of the government. If we lose, we are doomed. It's over. So therefore, there was this fear that once they arrive, most of us will be slain or sent to work as slaves in Indonesia, the Philippines, these places, to make up for our crimes over there. And another reason is the mentality of Asian people in general. Let's say, especially China, Japan, etc. When it comes to war, once you conquer a place, usually that's what was expected. You kill all the men, capture the women, and try to snuff out the culture and the people and create something brand new.
Mhm. And
It's don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Westerners, wherever they went, were like, "Oh, we just won the war. Don't worry, we'll treat you with velvet gloves and everything." No, there was barbaric treatments of of different groups in different countries, etc. But the idea is you do not massacre an entire population once they are defeated for two reasons. One is the Christian values that, in one way or another, survived in the Western mentality. And the second one is if you kill everyone, it's way more difficult to work the land and create better trade and relationships with those who have survived, and therefore it's difficult for trades and the merchants to work between our countries. So it was on one side the Christian background, and on the other side the more like opportunistic idea that we need to make sure that we can keep the trade flowing from their countries to ours and from our countries to theirs.
mhm. So of the two stories, I would say that the idiot is much better written than
I do believe, yes. I do believe the strong point of the idiot is that the narrative is more like a bit more the traditional story, whereas the other one has a lot being more like this person recalling the wartime, thinking back. It's a bit more disjointed, which is both the strength of it and the weakness of it. I like it because it feels more personal, like someone telling a story. Oftentimes, you digress or go back to events and then move forward, fast forward to other events or other images that pop up in your mind about a certain situation. And it's crafted rather well in this regard, but at the same time, it's a little bit the weakness because it's a bit more difficult to get a complete feeling of what's going on. Even if the idiot ends rather abruptly, I kind of like the way it ends because it's like on a cliffhanger, but it's done properly. It's like I wonder what will happen to these two characters, and it's a good in a sense it's a good thing that you are left wondering. Whereas in the other one, it's a little bit more vague, but in a confusing way. Which, as a story narrated by someone after the fact, it's more realistic, but at the same time, it's a bit it's less satisfying.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, I think it didn't start out that badly. The one woman and the war one. With the whole thing about Fatty and Mantis. Like you do get this same kind of introduction where like they really portray these disgusting people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can almost picture like the man is like a shriveled up, cynical old man, and the other one, the usual stereotype of the fat old man.
yeah,
More like sort of like a parody of the Buddha, in a sense, like this fat person that is content with anything that is going around him, only in this very cynical way. So it's like this anti-Buddha figure,
yeah. I mean,
where his peace of mind is because of the suffering of all those around him.
yeah. I mean, the thing that got me was when when she said that they would like go and stare so much at the corpses of dead women after the
Yeah.
bombings. Uh,
Again, I like it because there is a strange mix in that short story of eroticism and macabre, which it's something that you don't find in many stories, and it's not usually when they do it, it's blended in a very bad way with the story. Whereas Sakaguchi is really good at doing this. It's really good at playing with the tone of the scene, which is the mark of a remarkable writer. And this is where he shines the best. That story, like showing the depravity of mankind, no matter the situation. Which I'm not on board 100%, but it's something that, let's say, it's something of a Machiavellian point of view, like that humanity is depraved, and therefore there are the strongest, uh, let's say, stronger individuals that need to be in the lead. Otherwise, this would be a common practice, so to say. And that how this war was able to, it describes it at one point as the layers of their personality being peeled away and their true nature shining through. And it's like, again, a mantis and this fat cruel man.
mhm. So, unfortunately, I was unable to find anything in the way of, you know, like visual representation. So basically, like, because we were able to find, when it came to the story about the cherry blossoms, we were able to find, you know, both a movie
Yeah,
adaptation.
exactly.
Um,
I do believe it's because these ones are, compared to a fairy tale, this one probably are events that are still too fresh in the Japanese mind, in the common conscience of the nation to be brought up. And it's a very cruel description of a nation. So maybe there are, who knows, maybe in 20 years we'll see an adaptation of one of these short stories. The Idiot, I think, will make for a very good movie, like a period movie. It
yeah.
reminded me, I don't want to sound like uh, pretentious or anything, but there is a story. If I remember right, was written by Tommaso di Lampedusa, an Italian writer. No, what the hell am I saying? It's not him. It's oh, forgive me, Verga, and it's called I Malavoglia, which is the name of a family. Malavoglia we would translate to um, those who have no desire to do anything. It says they've got no desire to do anything, and it's the story of this family and their decline in their village from a very rich and affluent family to losing everything. And it sort of ends in a similar way to The Idiot, with like one of the main characters returning to the village where they were born. Now they are pretty much homeless and living in the streets. And at the end, he just waits for the sun to rise, and look who's the first one to wake up and realize the village idiot is the first one to wake up. It's it has the same kind of melancholic ending of ending doom, but these characters somehow will survive. You get the feeling. So it could be turned into and then it was adapted into a neo-realist movie that was like the Italian cinema of Gentiloni. You know, I think it's something that was spoken about in the end of that movie. Throw away your books, rally in the street, and it's this kind of stories set among the common folks and
Mm.
how their lives are going. It was adapted into a movie that is called La Terra Trema, if I remember right. The Earth Shakes. Um, and it's a very slow-paced movie showing the common folks and how they live, and then introducing the story of this family and going through the main events of the story. And this one, I think, will benefit from a similar adaptation, like a slow-paced story about first introducing this neighborhood and how people live day by day, which is sort of what the story itself does, and then start to focus on the main plot about this young, naive journalist and this woman that ends up um, barging in his life in this strange way and ending up in the same like quiet spot at the end of the story. So
Ye-
maybe it's too early, but in the near future we could see an adaptation made in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think if maybe like if it showed like the common people in a nicer way or something like, I think it would have been able to get away with an adaptation more easily.
Yes, that's the only thing. Compared to Verga was um, as a writer was a realist, so he tried to depict the people in an honest way, but also without being too cruel in in judging their vices compared to other storytellers. Whereas Sakaguchi seems to be rather, I don't say he finds pleasure in it, but for sure it's way more cynical, and he doesn't seem to care to expose the worst part of his own people,
Mm.
even during a time of crisis like the war.
Yeah, so the only thing in the way of visual representations that I could find was so in the book where it was translated, what was it called again? The
Oh
modern,
yeah, a collection of modern Japanese literature, something like this.
yeah, modern Japanese stories anthology.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Let me
Uh,
see if I can find the title.
um. Anyway, in there, you can basically you can find it on Wikipedia. If you go
Yes,
to
yes, modern Japanese stories. Yeah, title.
and there's like a woodcut um illustration or something
Hmm.
of the idiot being carried by the protagonist. What was it? Its name is Izawa.
Yes, in the river, which is one of the last few, like one of the last scenes in the story.
Yeah. So one of the things which annoyed me about that recitation by that professor online is that early on he basically spoils it by saying, "Oh, you know, oh this is foreshadowing for the bombing," because otherwise I wouldn't have had any idea that it was about the bombing really. Um, I think that the foreshadowing that he
Hmm.
pointed out was something about some guy building a shelter for himself or something.
Yeah,
Um, right.
yeah, because they said it was almost impossible to build air shelters because as soon as you started to dig into the soil, water would start to pour up.
Mm. So, I guess another thing, which you can kind of see, or at least, or maybe I just imagined it, is that like, the characters seem to be very determined not to die.
Hmm.
Yeah, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but like like um, they talk about how like this voice like an apocalypse is going to kill all of us, and oh, we are also resigned to it. But
Hmm.
um, you know, when something does happen, they do
Well,
their
it's
best. Yeah.
let's say it's I would say it's a common delusion of everyone since we live live through life through our own eyes and everything. It's like a movie for us. Like we perceive it moment by moment through our own eyes. It seems almost impossible that no matter what is going to happen, oh, I'm going to survive. Why? Because I am. I am. Not even because I am the main protagonist. I am. Therefore, I will live. It's a common illusion of every man and every woman, no matter the time. The Roman Empire is falling. I will survive because I am. The Black Plague is striking Europe. Oh, I will survive because I am. All the ants are invading. Oh, I will survive because I am. And the way he tackles it, I find it very true to life. This idea that no matter the situation, I will survive because I am.
Mm, right. Um, I, I believe One Woman and the War was much shorter. Took me much.
Oh, yeah, way shorter. It's like, I think it's like 14, 15 pages.
Um, so if I remember correctly, in the Rakuron, I always say that it's that the Rakuron means a thesis on decadence, but
Hmm.
I'm not sure whether that's the actual translation or just something that I came up with because it sounds
No,
cool.
no, should be one of like one of the terms can be translated on like perversity, decadence. It's
Yeah.
something like the definition is not as clear as in English or in other European languages. It's something that can be read in between those two terms.
So in that essay, I think that Sakaguchi said that he didn't leave Tokyo, but that I think there was like a first person thing um of basically him going up to a roof with a crew.
Yes, with a group of similar, like there is a TV crew or something like this, and that pretty much, yeah, they are the only ones that are not leaving because they want to show to the rest of Japan what's going on, and somehow they're able to be stronger than their own individual fear, the fear of losing their life,
Hmm. Um, y-
if I remember right.
yeah, yeah. So basically, they are recording the American planes coming to drop bombs.
Mhm.
Um,
For posterity.
yeah, and it sort of reminded me that moment where like the protagonist in The Idiot lies to the tailor and says something like, "Oh, I can't leave yet because as an entertainer, like I have to be I can't lose this opportunity."
Yeah, I must document it, and it's just because he wants to make sure no one finds out the truth about what's going on. So let's maybe make, before we go any further, let's uh, a quick rundown of the story.
All right, off The Idiot first, I guess.
Hmm.
Okay, so how did so it starts off with I mean, it's in third person, but I kind of get the feeling that these are basically the protagonist's thoughts, Anyway,
Sort
Isawa
of,
starts.
yeah.
Yeah. Isawa starts anyway. Where he starts off by describing a very miserable neighborhood, I guess.
Mm. Ridden with prostitution, people who are mentally unstable. There is even an incestuous couple. It's like brother and sister living together, and with the mother covering for them pretty much, even if everyone else knows.
Right. The doctor covering up, uh, a
Hmm.
suicide. Uh, um, yeah. Um, and then it gets to the place where the protagonist is. Um, yeah, it was a little bit. It was a little bit confusing there. Um, so so the owners of that place, which I I think it must have been something like an apartment building or something. I'm not sure.
It was more, I'd say, it was like an old-fashioned house with also a separate quarters for maybe the servants, and a separate smaller building that was built as a storage and then repurposed as the lodging for their son who suffered from tuberculosis, and therefore they were afraid it could be contagious. They
So
separated him.
yeah, I mean, so there are a bunch of characters here, and it's not entirely clear which ones actually end up mattering that much. Um,
Yeah, but I think it's part of the beauty. Just shows you the entirety of this neighborhood and how people live day by day. Shows a lot of the women are like prostituting themselves or having affairs with different powerful people just to get maybe something extra when it comes to the money, or war rations.
I mean, I think even the woman, the old woman, who was the tobacconist, which I imagine is just of
Yes.
the old woman selling tobacco, um, he says that she had just gotten rid of her seventh or eighth lover,
Yeah,
and I don't know.
exactly.
I mean, she's 55 or something. I don't know. Is this something that really happened, or uh,
I think so. There is, and this reminds me of another story. Uh, it's set in post World War II in Italy, and it's called. The translation would be "The Moon and the Bonfires." And there is one description of this lady that does a similar job, like she's the ticket seller at a theater slash cinema. And if you know how to, it describes, I remember vividly this scene, like it describes how if you place your hand in a certain way on the counter, she would know that you were there not to buy a ticket but just to have some illicit fun behind the back. And it describes this lady. This is by what's the name of the author? I don't remember. It's like rather Cesare Pavese, and it describes how people would go there just to have a cheap thrill, and this woman was fine with it because she too wanted to escape the mundane life of post World War II Italy.
mm,
So it's believable. It's believable enough.
yeah, I mean, and then it says that uh, that if you were a young man, then you would be able to get it cheaper.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because she wanted
Yeah,
some fun too, so it
yeah,
was like, I'll give you a discount because honestly, you could get better than me. Uh,
I see, I see. Um, okay. And what happens after the description?
Well,
I'm
pretty much it shows how the character got used to live in this place, the crazy neighbor that sometimes refuses to listen to anyone and then goes on the roof and starts to give orders on how to prepare for air raid. And then there is the introduction of the title character, this crazy person, this madman is described as having a wife who's an idiot. This guy went on a spiritual journey at one point, like all of a sudden he left, went to a pilgrimage, and on the way back, pretty much, it describes like taking her as a souvenir, bringing her back home, and marrying her. And it's described almost more like a pet, like a bizarre domestic pet rather than a woman. And there is this mixture of pitiful and laughable when these descriptions come along. You cannot get an exact feeling, but you can feel that something in between making fun and feeling sorry for both this crazy person and his idiot wife.
Hmm. Right. And I think, I, yeah, I think that they're both described as in appearance that they looked good. But they were,
Yes,
yeah.
like by the look of it, you couldn't tell that the guy was completely insane. Far from it, he was a he was a handsome man, and the wife too was rather beautiful in her own way. But he was a complete weirdo who would laugh and then all of a sudden jump into a fit and start to do everything that was asked during the air raids. And on the other side, the wife was unable to understand anything what was going on around her, and got scared like a child whenever there was an air raid or something like this, and would start to panic.
Hmm. So next, I believe that is the protagonist, Izawa, just complaining about his job, and about being a writer or something. No, I think he's a filmmaker. Um,
Yeah, he graduated as a journalist, and then he was moved to this like company that was making educational films, and so he was forced to do this again wartime propaganda movies about different things, and he's like trying to explain to his co-workers and even his boss how art should be more, and how they should strive for originality and deeper meaning. And again, it's kind of funny because you can get a feel that Sakaguchi is saying this young man doesn't understand the situation he's in, and at the same time, his boss is too cynical about it. As I say, both of you are getting this wrong because you are too naive and you completely gave up. You just want to get your paycheck, and that.
yeah. An interesting thing in that in that rant, I guess, which I guess is in third person, but it's basically Izawa's thoughts, and I guess basically Sakaguchi's thoughts maybe.
Mhm.
It's other than all the war cliches, is
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know
Oh, how inspiring the sight of the raising sun flag. All out thanks to you, Brace. Just, you can feel like in this case, yes, it's Sakaguchi putting his own words in this character's mouth and voicing them through him.
yeah, I found it interesting when he said that truth or real feeling in writing has nothing to do with censorship, because I believe that some of his stuff, obviously most of his stuff had to go through censors, both during the war
Mm,
and after the war as well. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, um, so there's that. Um,
like he's saying, no matter if it was out, it would be empty. So I'm saying, you people are useless as
yeah,
artists.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just people following trends,
Hmm.
saying whatever, and Toby.
whatever people want to hear or whatever
Yeah,
sells, trying to
yeah, and
appeal to them.
yeah, I also found it funny how like he described he described it how like this community is basically publishing houses of writers and whatever else, but like you know gambling societies of the Tokugawa period or something, and like
Mm,
the talents of the individual members were like um
didn't matter, yeah.
yeah it like
And they would just go
yeah it was just
go on rambling.
yeah it was just about like supporting each other and
Yep.
they were more bureaucratic than than the actual bureaucracy.
Yeah.
um
This one, I think it's a dig again. There is that. I think it's a saying about how the nail that sticks out is hammered down.
yeah
Um,
yeah but
Saying that in the even during the war, if anything, this was accentuated rather than reduced by the war and the precarious situation of Japan.
yeah I mean I think yeah it also like makes it um it's also he also draws a contrast between like that like I guess even during the war like they would speak about like um um they would basically dress like artists with their berets, their long hair and blah blah.
Yes.
But yeah, that's only all just for show. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Um, I guess it is
Yeah.
plausible.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you
No,
say?
sorry. Go
Yeah,
first.
I guess it is plausible that somebody thought about these things even during the war. I guess.
No, of course. I do believe this one. No matter the art, some people will always believe that art needs to express something higher because it's one way to try and elevate man outside of the current situation.
Do you think that that whole section could have been just cut out, or is that
No, I think it's part of it because he's talking about how art is meaningful, going against his boss and saying, which kind of says that art has no power and that only news matters. And after that, in a sense, he has to admit that despite everything, his boss has a point because it's like, if I had no income, I wouldn't be able to even think about this, about the betrayal of art. So it sort of makes sense. It's one of the threads that run throughout the story.
yeah? And I think it does it does sort of help with the pacing and
Yeah.
because the next thing which happens is that he finds the idiot woman in his
Hmm.
closet
Yeah.
and that sort of like comes out of nowhere, but it doesn't come like right after she's introduced, which would have been worse.
Hmm.
There's this
A
stuff.
bit too. Yeah,
Yeah.
would be a bit too fast. Let's say. So there is like this breathing room where you understand better how this character thinks and behaves and reacts to things around him. And so it makes sense when you see his reaction to these developments.
So, do you want to describe the meeting? I guess uh, between Izawa and the idiot. I guess what happens when.
It's kind of interesting because, yeah, it's like he goes, he finally returns home, and he sort of enters his room, turns on the lights, and getting home late. He finds that the bedding is missing, So it's like, what's going on? And opening the closet, he finds the woman like hiding under the bed, and she like furred it and threw it over her head. And they find it difficult to communicate because she's just like she keeps mumbling, she keeps saying things that makes no sense, interspersed with what she's really feeling, what she's really thinking. And it tries to make her understand that it's not going that okay, you run away from your house, I'm not gonna say anything, I'm gonna make sure I'm not gonna hurt you, I'm not upset about you coming here. Because it describes how her mother-in-law doesn't like her. It's first said that while the husband seems to be doing fine with her, the mother-in-law cannot stand this woman, and so she probably, after a scolding, she ran away because she was like panicking whenever she was scolded. She would be terrified,
I mean,
and so she found refuge there.
there's very little of like direct dialogue um from her, right?
Yeah, she just says things like it hurts because she was like pretty much so wounded by the last times that her mother-in-law scolded or berated her, and so she decided just to run away, but not knowing where to run away. And having already is described how earlier she would hide close to the pig pen because it's like um, the protagonist lives in this separate, smaller house, sort of a bungalow, and close to it there is like where the tailor keeps his animals. There is a duck, a hen, and there is like a small pig pen, and the woman would sometime hide there. And now this time she really wanted to run away. Therefore, not knowing where to go, she entered the bungalow and she hid inside the closet.
I mean, but later then it's explained that the reason why she went there is because she thought that he liked her.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. This is explained later on. He finally understands that just because he was kinder to her compared to other people, she believed he had some feelings for her.
I mean, the protagonist Izawa said that he doesn't, but in the end, I don't know. Maybe he lets her stay. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's more like out of pity rather than anything else. He understands that this woman is more like a child, and she will be like she will be even more hurt and lost if he didn't allow her to stay at least for a bit. I'm sure in his mind is like trying to think of ways in the future to return her to her husband. But at the same time, he realizes that it's not going to be easy because now she's convinced of these things, and in a way, sort of knows how difficult it is to change people's mind. Just before this, he had another fight with the boss about the meaning of art, and he realizes how hard it was to convince him of the meaning of art. And in this way, it's like, oh, it's going to be difficult to convince this woman I don't love her, first of all, and that she has to go back to her husband.
Mm. So if I recall, I think it's that it's in sort of in the middle of this where he like starts to think about his salary. Um,
Yeah, and the fear that maybe they will find out about her being in his room, and that could lead to a scandal, and therefore he could lose his job. But at the end, in a sense, he is both too tired and thrilled at the idea of things being different for a chance. And it's like, I don't care, I'll just let her stay here. So it's something in between carelessness and the desire to challenge himself, to break the monotony of his life that turns into a very unique sort of bravery and being like, I will test my faith to a degree and see how it goes.
So, yeah, yeah. I mean, so I remember that he, after stroking the woman's hair or something like if she were a child or something,
Yeah.
um, that's when he decides that he's going to keep her or something. Yeah. Um, you're starting.
More or less, it sees it again. It's this in a sort of way it dehumanizes her. She sees her more like either a child or a puppy that cannot live without this sort of uh, reassuring patting, like, yes, I'm gonna care for you. Yes, I love you. Yes, I care for you.
Mm.
There is this mixture of tragic and comedic almost in the way he has to pacify her and force her to go to sleep because she keeps running away. And it's not clear like if she's trying to tease him or if she's really afraid. Because being this is the thing. He says that the crazy man and her are like freer than other human beings because they don't work with the constraints of regular society, etc. So in a sense he's confused, whereas she's confused but in her own unique way. And therefore she sees things in a different way and she has less restraints than him.
Yeah, and while wondering about yeah, thinking about so basically the way that he starts thinking about his salary is that he basically says that um well, or rather the narrator says that well, Japan is about to be destroyed, but what actually bothered Izawa was um whether his salary would disappear or not.
Yeah, and
Um,
he realizes, yeah, sort of like everything will be destroyed, people will die, and yet the main concern in his mind, like, yes, I will survive, but I will survive without a salary.
and then he indulges in some escapism about like what if I survive the war? Like what would it be like afterwards?
Hmm.
But he can't really see it. Um, yeah. Okay, and yeah, and that's a good line where it says that Izawa wanted a woman, but the woman would be limited by the 200 yen and blah blah. He's so spare,
Yeah.
everything about him, even if he had a child, and yeah, the woman would also turn into a monster because he was poor or
Mhm.
something.
With the only concern being,
Mm.
which is a fear that it's understandable. Like, I think anyone trying to start a family has that fear. Like, if I don't work, I won't be able pay for the bills. Therefore, my child will grow up in utter uh, poverty. And what will my wife think of me, etc., etc.
So Netsi jumps forward to like the woman has been there for a while
Yeah.
at, at his place, but he's like it doesn't really um uh he doesn't really think about it that much, except at some moments or something.
Mhm.
I think he said or something like that. He remembered two different phases of her or something. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
it's sort of like he sees her on one side like a scared child, and on the other side, like describes her as like an animal, like a giant caterpillar that can only feel terror, like complete terror, and that terror turns her into this insect, literally something disgusting and scary almost.
Uh, uh,
And war seems to create this kind of amnesia where it seems to him like it's always been like this with woman living with him, and that things that were not like this 1 week ago seems to be accepted as eternal truths, or things are always been that way. There's like this kind of descriptions, and it's kind of strange. It's kind of interesting at the same time because it shows how war is affecting his mind and his perception of the people around.
mm, um, yeah. It's yeah. It's sort of like it basically has a lot of observations about the war here, here and there
Hmm.
and everywhere. Which, yeah, like for I think I can't remember exactly where, but like he later on talks about how um children react during their age,
Hmm.
um
Yeah, they are more like more courageous than men,
or
than
they
adult.
appear, or at least.
Hmm.
But
They seem to accept it better. Sense.
but the woman um she's just disgusting because
Yeah,
yeah, it's like
there
that.
is nothing. Yeah, like she shows. He said that she's driven either by terror, and then it's when he sees her like a sort of like giant worm, or the desire of being loved, that he says like sort of like an underlining lust feeling her, no matter what's going on. So he sees her as divided either between this excitement for his love of hers, even if he knows that he doesn't really love her the way she wishes. And on the other side, this kind of insect like non stop excitement and terror at the war itself, especially when there is like bombers flying ahead and the air raid sirens blare out their call to go to the shelters, etc.
Mm. It's, I mean, sometimes I kind of felt like maybe he was a little bit too too mean spirited towards the woman. Like,
Well, I think that was Sakaguchi trying to show how dehumanizing the situation like war was for the people he was able to observe.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like especially I remember that that description where after the bomb. I think it's from this essay where after the bombing, the people looked like foul. Um, and I think it was from this essay, or maybe it was from another one by him. I can't remember now. Um, let's check. Foul. I think it. Birds. Um. Yeah, I can't find it. It's too long.
Hmm.
Or maybe I can't find it. Yeah. I found it. On all sides, people lay dead like so many roast fowl. Um,
Oh yeah,
they lay dead in great clusters. Yes, they were exactly like roast fowl. They were neither gruesome nor dirty. Some of the corpses lay next to the bodies of dogs and were burned in exactly the same way, in the same manner, as if to emphasize how um, completely useless their deaths had been, and it goes on. Yeah, like, yeah. Now I can't stop thinking about like that professor in the recitation video said that like he that just angle compares the people to animals. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty obvious.
I
But
think it's like the showing how war desensitizes you to its own horrors, and they become sort of something you accept as a fact.
yeah, I think there's one time when Ango goes a little bit over the top, with the thing, with the dream, um, where like so the Izawa compares the idiot woman to a pig or something, and then
Yeah,
he has a dream of or rather he remembers um seeing uh, a bunch of kids um
cutting away as the
yeah,
flesh
yeah, yeah,
of a piglet,
yeah, and
and
yeah, and then he sees sort of a vision or a dream. I think it's a dream of yeah, basically a man while having sex with a woman from behind, ta
yeah,
taking
doing
off,
the same thing and carving her flesh.
yeah, but the woman not realizing it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, I think that was a bit much, but yeah, we get the point. Um. Okay, so where have did we leave?
After that, there is sort of a description of the effects of the different type of bombings on Tokyo. The incendiary ones are more like a lot of noise, and then all of a sudden they explode, and it's more like a firework. If you're not too close to the area, it's almost something worth watching because it comes to nothing. And now instead, the regular bombing is what scares most people the most because you can hear the bomb coming closer and closer, and you keep wondering if it's gonna hit me or not.
right.
After that, it's the real bombing of Tokyo. I think it's like in April, right? And it's when the area where the main character and the woman Warizawa and the idiot are living finally struck by the bombing, and there is sort of like a description of the people running away, of the city being engulfed in flames, and how everyone reacts, where and how they wish to run away, what they are trying to do to either survive or find a way out of that situation.
Right. Um. So I guess, did you feel like the description of the bombing was different between the two essays, the two short stories?
Honestly, I feel I feel like in the idiot was a bit more in depth, but the feeling you get it's very similar, like these devastating attacks that turn people into almost mindless animals just trying to run for safety,
Mm.
which I think is true of any kind of bombing. I read descriptions of the bombing of Genoa during World War II, and they are very similar, like just people running for the closest shelter, almost trampling on one another to try and get to the safe areas.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and I've heard that, and actually, I've actually seen some people um, I mean, or rather, I knew an old woman in Italy who had been outside during one of these air raids on Lucca, and yeah, she basically lost her mind because of the bombing, and afterwards, yeah.
Mm,
Mm, she was a child, obviously, so maybe this must have been worse. So I've never actually been in an air raid, obviously, but back when I was in Sri Lanka, there was like an attempt at a copycat. Um, yes, so basically, a bunch of terrorists tried to do a 9/11 on the twin towers in Colombo, which are obviously smaller, but,
mm,
but you because that's where the World Trade Center and the central bank are. Anyhow, um, it failed. Um, one of the planes crashed into another building, killing 50 people or something, but the other one was able to get away quite a distance. And it happened to pass over uh, the house where I lived, and it was late at night. So we all turned off the lights, just in case, you know, uh, the,
yeah,
while
they decided to
to
crash
drop,
the plane or
uh,
something.
yeah, or drop some explosive, crash the
Hmm.
plane, because they were being pursued by other planes belonging to
Hmm.
um, the Air Force, basically.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it was pretty exciting. A lot of people went outside to look at it, and some people basically had stuff drop bombs and whatever drop from from outside. Some people basically just ended up dying because it looked pretty. Now, yeah, it looked pretty.
Yeah,
Um,
I think again it's this kind of morbid curiosity. Like in a sense, we are so bored that even something like this is preferable to nothing happening at all. Be it a war or just something like this, like
yeah,
terroristic attack.
it's more exciting than actual fireworks because you might actually die while looking at it, I
No,
guess.
exactly. In a sense, you feel more alive than ever because you know that you will die in that moment on the spot.
Yeah. I guess that sort of reminded me of mostly, I guess, rather than the idiot, what the woman was thinking about,
Hmm.
the woman's thoughts about
In
the airport.
yeah,
Um,
instead in the idiot is mostly like the character realizes that there is a crisis situation and everyone is trying to run away and is like, I need to calm down. I need to think things through before I act. Especially because it's like he's saying at one point to the tailor decides to hide everything, like it's his most important possessions inside a shelter, and he hides it with some mud. And then it's like the main character is always, I'll just stay a little bit longer, and um, it's in a sense there is on one side it's because he's honestly curious, and on the other side it's because he knows if he runs away with the woman right now, he'll be discovered. Which I kind of it's kind of fascinating seeing the two sides of man. One side, the desire to see what's going on with his own eyes, and on the other side, the fear of being found out and being accused of being like a wife stealer or something like this.
Yeah, and you know, it's also kind of interesting because like he's still he's still worried about what people might think or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Even in such a situation, like there is a sort of facade, social facade he has to uphold. Least some people may speak bad of him while the city burns to the ground.
Yeah, because it's not like he actually believes that it's wrong or whatever. It's just that yeah,
Hmm.
um,
People may talk
and
about it.
he does also I think earlier he does also observe that like like society or whatever the people would be like those degenerates that in the neighborhood that the narrator told us about, and
Hmm.
Isawa knows that it's them, so why should he care about what they think about him? but but
Yeah,
still.
because the thing is, those things already know, so it's too late to hide them. Whereas, even if it's not his fault, even if this woman just walked into his room one night, it could be there could be a misunderstanding, and his name could be um, like could be dragged to the mud, and then he could lose his job. And I think that's one of his biggest fears, like it was described earlier, that he's not gonna receive his salary.
Hmm.
And no matter the situation, I think most people, I'm not excluding myself, will do the same, like for fear of being judged by others and lose credibility and maybe even lose job. You'd rather take the risk of getting hit by a bomb rather than being misunderstood or being labeled something you don't want
Yeah.
to be labeled as.
And I guess yeah, I guess in a way, I mean, I guess they could afford it too, but people like Sakaguchi and maybe Dazai, I don't know, kind of lived in a way where like I wouldn't say that they didn't care, but um I guess they tried not to or something. They
Yeah, they
tried.
were trying to detach themselves from how their society was looking upon such things.
Mhm, right. Um. Yeah. The title of the video is messed up for some reason. So it's a little bit messed up. I'll fix it later. It says
Yeah, yeah.
um, Sakaguchi's short stories about the Tokyo bombing, and then for some reason it has a message hashtag recording channel. I don't know how he got there, but
It's fine.
it's fine. I'll fix that later. Um,
The last part of the idiot is quite interesting. It shows the people fleeing through the fastest route, and instead, how very few go for the safest route, which is through there is like a small creek, a small river, and some of the people, very few, Izawa and woman included, go there, and it's the only time when the woman finally, in this moment of crisis, does something on its own, and something that makes sense. Once they get into the river, they soak the blankets that they wrap themselves into because there's flames all over them. And for the first time, the woman does something. She dips herself into the river, and to ensure that she doesn't get scalded or burnt by the flames. And it's the only time that he feels something, the only time that Izawa feels something more than just the pity you feel for an animal, and the pity you feel more like for another human being. There is something like it's rather cruel in a sense. It's like for once her humanity shines through, and Izawa is able to fully accept her as another human being.
I mean, wasn't it because she nodded when he said that, like, what did he say? You will you will only die if you go that way, he whispered. When we die,
Yes,
when we
yes.
die, we'll be together just like this.
Hmm.
Don't be frightened and don't leave my side, whatever you do. Forget about those flames and those bombs. The road of our two lives will always be this road. You just look straight ahead along this road and rely on me. Do you understand? And then the woman nodded.
Hmm.
It was a childish nod, but Izawa was overwhelmed with emotion. For this was the first sign of volition.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
For the first time, the woman acts like a human being, and it's because he acts, in a sense, he wanted to protect her, and maybe she misunderstood him, but at least for once she was able to, in a way that it was accepted by him, it was acceptable for him as a human reality.
Mm, yeah. Um, I think that's about it. I mean, then the I guess the next interesting thing which happens is the dream, but we already talked about it.
And
Uh,
then the two of them finally arrive to an open field, and then yeah, it's pretty much him thinking, well, we survived, let's hope we can go on to survive no matter what after all of this. And there is like a policeman saying to them, go to the nearest rallying point, like the bombing is over, like almost if nothing happened. And it's like we're gonna rest here for a little. And he ends with him pondering what is going to happen to him, and he goes again, seeing her once more like an animal, wondering what's going to happen to him and to the pig next to him, like, and how it's going, and how the day that it's starting, it's very cold. There is like this sort of this. I wouldn't say it's despair. It's more like cynical view of life in being stuck in this weird situation. Moment that I see it's more like something annoying rather than something terrible. It's like I'm stuck with this person now. Why me?
yeah, I think I mean even though it's a short story, I think Ango did a good job of like when the proverbial shit hits the fan. I did actually care about like are they going to survive or are they going to
Oh
die?
yeah, no, no, exactly. You feel that you can. It's there is a palpable fear that they may not make. They run through the streets on fire. They jump into the river. They keep going while everything is devastated and on fire around them. And it gives you a good, like, you really feel for these two characters. It's the only time that Izawa, well, feels something more than just uh, what you would feel for an animal next to you. Like, of course, you will try to save your cat because it's your cat, but you don't see it the same as your grandmother or your brother. It's
Uh,
more like a possession rather than another autonomous human being.
yeah. I I don't feel like the scene in One Woman and the War um during the bombing was really nearly as effective.
I think it's brief because it's briefer and it's like more a memory.
Mm,
It's her recalling those events and what she went through. Like it's her mental state rather than the events unfolding.
yeah. And
Because the story until then, it's always about how she feels about the war and the people around him and about herself and why she's like this, even in such a situation. And she doesn't make any excuse, honestly. She says that the only reason she stay because she did a sort of way she wanted the house to survive, just in spite of the situation, rather than because um, she cared about the future or anything else. It's more like an instinct in the moment. I'd say this is the biggest difference between the two short stories.
Mm.
Everything is like showing the selfishness in A Woman and the War is about the selfishness of this woman and of the people around her, and like how she's justifying her own behavior during and after the war. Whereas The Idiot, it's about the human such situations and how, no matter what, there are certain things that, as ridiculous as they may be, we try to salvage even during a situation of crisis. So it's our trying to, um, not to lose his job because he kept the woman with him. His boss refusing to listen to his ideas because why aren't you content with just getting your salary and doing a simple job? How the neighbor lived even
And
before the war.
I mean, to be honest though, like I'm not sure whether it's made clear that Izawa would lose his job if people found out that he was with this
Well,
woman.
for sure, you can sort of feel that people will start to talk, and that his biggest fear is that the voice will start to spread, and that could bring a bad reputation upon his name. And of course, that would lead probably to that. So it's one of his fears, for sure. Like, not expressed, but it's one of the things you can try and connect.
Mm. Yeah, because I just got the feeling that he just didn't want them to want them to find out, obviously, because the madman might get violent, but also
Yeah, also
yeah,
that.
but also because he just had that Japanese thing of really caring about what other people think about
Hmm.
you, essentially.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I kind of get the feeling in both stories that basically the characters have more feelings towards each other um during the air raids, but then after that is gone, everything returns back to normal, and
Yeah,
yeah, that feeling is
which I
lost.
bet, yeah, because in the moment you are afraid of losing your life, there is a concrete, immediate risk of being blown to bits. Whereas when it's not happening, it's the same as we don't think about our death that much during a common day. No, we just think, oh, tomorrow I'll have to go to work. Tomorrow I'll have to go to the post office and pay this. Or tomorrow I'll have to do the laundry. And like, it's not the idea that tomorrow you could cross the road and a bus could hit you in the face, you end up dead. Whereas during a air raid, that's of course one of the biggest risks, and that's why in a sense, you feel more alive than ever. You're more acutely aware of your mortality, and it describes how different people react to this. There are those who are almost gleeful, and they hope that others die so that they can go on, and those who are like the main protagonist. She feels alive because it's interesting how it describes. It's like everything feels, almost more real than reality, but as soon as it's over, it feels like a betrayal, because then you go back to the cycle of just living a daily life, even if it's everything around you, it's been bombed and destroyed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like both the woman and the mantis, they are like after the bombing, they're like, so that's it. Why is it just
Hmm.
500 planes and not and not 5,000
Yeah,
bucks.
why is not the whole sky covered in bombers and so on and so forth?
Mm.
And the only way they can cope is the mantis hopes that everything will be destroyed, and she tries to, like, I don't know, it's their relationship um uh, with the world outsider. The only way she can feel for what's the name of his lover is forgot the name. Oh, Nomura. Um, she sort of sees him like an innocent, like one of the few innocents in the war, and she's something in between a lover and almost a mother figure. She acts that way towards him. It's kind of interesting how Sakaguchi analyzes femininity or how a woman would think in such a situation. And I cannot say if it's realistic, not being a woman and not knowing how living under a bombing is, but it captures very well this idea of this person that's been like always felt a sense of depravity, and the war heightened it. It was sort of something she was almost hoping for, and
Yeah,
now once everything goes back to normal, finds it almost fastidious.
yeah. I mean, it's a bit edgy, but I kind of get it. Like if there's going to be
But
destruction,
it's sort of a honest edginess. It's like something that you will think to yourself in the privacy of your own mind, or that you would write inside a diary, and everything flows out of you in sort of that very uh, livid, like all the emotions are heightened. Um, you don't control yourself. Of course, when if you were to speak about this in public, you would try and describe everything in a way that is acceptable. But since there is this sort of veil of anonymity and uh, confidentiality, she can be as honest and brutal and, in a sense, even disgusting in
yeah.
how she describes her own feelings and doesn't need to control herself.
I mean, even Izawa, I remember, said that he felt like that he wanted to sleep soundly in the arms of the god of destruction. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
all the characters seems to find a sort of pleasure in the destruction to a different degree and for different reasons. Izawa seems to be more like, because he has this artistic flair to it, whereas the characters in A Woman and the War, they are either afraid of what's going to happen after the war. So Nomura wishes to die because he's afraid after the war he's gonna be treated as a slave and he will see the destruction of Japan. The woman just wants some form of excitement in her life, and the mantis seems to just enjoy the idea of being one of the few survivors while everything burns around.
Yeah. Another memorable scene that we forgot from the idiot was I think at the beginning of the Yare when Izawa just just goes out to the well to brush his teeth with the
Yeah, yeah, true. He walks out like it's just another day, and with a towel on his shoulder, he brushes his teeth, washes his face, and it's like it's like almost saying it's about time.
yeah
And now I'm ready.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's because it says that he had managed to obtain a tube of line toothpaste, and
Yeah, like it's finally time to show it off.
y- y- yeah, like I guess it seems a bit comedic to us, but I guess that like it was like luxury item or something
Yeah,
during
would be
the
the
war.
same like as uncorking a bottle of fine wine while I don't know a ship sinks and you are on the ship. Is like, well, let me enjoy this last luxurious thing that I got in my life, and then think about my escape if I'd be able to escape even.
Yeah, yeah,
There is sort of a kind of self awareness and self irony of how limited we are in that situation.
yeah. And also like I kind of find it a bit funny that's like the little treasure thing that
Hmm.
he has got.
The toothpaste.
Yeah. Because I remember hearing a story about like that about Ango as well, that like he had like a suitcase with like um American soap and whatever
Ah,
some other
okay.
stuff that he got by
So
Americans.
it's sort of it's like a little bit of a autobiographic
Yeah. And,
nudge, a
yeah.
real event.
And apparently like he said that like that was the most precious thing he had or something. Um
Hmm.
right. Which is kind of I guess because like when you think of like people who think deeply spiritually or whatever, like and the most valuable thing that they have, you wouldn't think that it's like some soap, like or something material like that.
Well, reminds me a little bit of that Zen story about the guy who's is this guy running away from a bunch of guards, and he falls off the edge of like a ravine. Is dangling from a from a dead branch that is about to snap. So there are these soldiers on top of him with the spears, and he noticed that down below there is like a bunch of tigers. As soon as he falls down, they are going to devour him. So it's either gonna get stabbed to death or fall and be devoured alive by these feral animals. And he noticed next to him a small, like a small bush of strawberries. He grabs one, eats it, and it's like it's the best strawberry I ever had in my life, the sweetest one. I think it's the same kind of concept, only a bit more ironic in the way that Sakaguchi portrays it.
Yeah, yeah. Um. Okay. What else is there to say about this? I guess one of the things which the Japanese I've seen people criticize the Japanese for is that like when it comes to like depicting the war, like it's always about like them getting bombed. Or
Exactly, like you did horrible things in all these countries, and you only think about yourself. I'm like, makes sense. This is their experience. So it's the
mm,
same almost with every country. You describe your own misery. No one has their own misery. And there are also, honestly, there are also works on the crimes of Japan, etc. I was saying, I think I posted it in one of the channels, saying that there is a very good book. It's called The Poison and the Sea by Shushaku Endo, the same author of Silence, which describes the experiment of that military unit, Unit 7.
3-1, I
Uh,
think.
what, yeah, 731. And describes um, um, them using American prisoners of wars as test subjects for various experiments. One of them is seeing how much blood uh, a soldier can lose before he dies, and how much saline solution you can put in their vein before they die. So it's a rather gruesome book, but he describes honestly how these people were just people. They did horrible things, but they were humans. And so I don't think it's wrong to try and portray the suffering of your people. during a war, even if you were on the um, quote. Let's put some heavy quotes here, like uh, bad side of history.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand why people will be a little bit upset about Japan only talking about their own suffering, but at the same time, it's understandable why they would do this. The bombing of their cities were as tragic as the bombing of English cities, or of French cities, or German, Italian, Spanish cities. Doesn't matter which faction, most of the people involved in a war when it comes to civilians have little control about what their general, what their head of the state decide to do, joining one side or the other, or not joining at all.
On the other hand, like uh, I mean, to be fair, this was probably published during the American during the American occupation, but
Mhm.
still, like I didn't feel anywhere like that it was particularly hateful towards the Americans who did the bombing either. It was like a natural phenomena or something
Oh,
almost.
exactly, shows it like it's a side of war. The Americans were doing their part, and the Japanese were doing their part. And at the end, when they arrived in Japan, they weren't as cruel and as monstrous as they were expected them to be, which is what upsets to a degree the main protagonist of A Woman and the.
Mm, yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, come to think of it, like it, according to the woman, at least, like nothing changed, or at least nothing seemed to have changed. Um, and I imagine that's basically what Angus thought as well.
Yeah, like no matter the devastation, after a little bit, people forgot about everything and went back to their normal life.
I mean, that's the whole thing with the Rakuron, right? Like it's not like that people have become more decadent or something. It's they were
Mm,
always this way or something. At least that's what he thinks. All
yeah.
right. What else is there to talk about? Um, Anything else to add?
No, I think we talked about the characters, the themes, and how the two stories have common points are kind of in common. There is this same sense of how the war brought out this brutal animalistic side in many, and at the same time how it also at one point gave some sort of hope in a strange way, like um, that by this destruction maybe something will come out of it. And I think that's what Ango Sakaguchi was hoping. Like, now that everything is being blown to pieces, we can try and create a new meaning. We can create a new society. But it seemed to be, and even is in later be like disappointed with what the results actually were. It's a very interesting look at one side of the war that we often don't think about, the civilians. Most pieces of media usually focus on the experience of the soldiers at the front. Very few talk about what those left at home experienced, especially in these tragic conditions. I can
Mm-hmm.
imagine the suffering of the people of Japan when bombed were equal to that of people in any other country that had to face air raids or invasion. So it felt like an interesting take from a very interesting point of view by a very unique writer,
Did you
because he was able to show the brutality of his own people and the brutality of the war.
did you feel like there was like a pacifist message or something?
For me, more than a pacifist message, there was the message that there is a dark part of us that enjoys to a degree even the worst things that we can bring upon ourselves, and that sometimes we have this wish that sometimes anything is better than complete boredom, because even the characters in The Idiot, to a lesser degree, they seem to want to get something out of this war. Even Izawa wishes to create art, but of course it will be art related to the events that are happening around him. And he would like just to give them a deeper meaning than just, oh, this is another,
War is bad, create art, and
yeah, this is just another event we need to represent it.
I see, I see.
So it's a scary, maybe something that I don't fully agree with, but it's a scary look into a dark part of our nature that we oftentimes in the West think we move behind, or because we are, or in our times this couldn't happen, or in our civilization we moved behind this. And instead, for example, the war that's going on right now, it's a reminder that it
Because
could happen even in our country.
yeah, because stuff which is about like civilians in war, like Grave of the Fireflies or whatever, like
Hmm.
they sort of end up just saying like war is bad. That's the message,
Yeah.
guys. Which I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but
No, no. Instead, in this case, for example, there is that sentence at the beginning of A Woman and the War, where it's like describing how the true nature of um, of the mantis and of Fatih finally came out. Like it was hidden, they couldn't manifest it, but because the war, in a sense, allowed them to show that side, because everything is being devastated around them, and so no one will care about these views because there are more serious problems around. That's something that exists in a sense in all of us, and we just cannot manifest. It's the difference between being a nice person, being a good person. A good person, maybe um, it can be difficult to be around by a set, like set amount of values and virtues it lives day by day, whereas a nice person is someone that maybe wouldn't have a fly, but given the occasion, he will do the most depraved things if he could get away with it. And I think this is something that a war would reveal, where virtue and real virtue and just the fake morals that are upheld by a society because you don't want people to talk about you and so on and so forth, they will fall off.
hmm.
And I think that's what that short story sort of exposed.
So I guess what about scores? Um, out of 10, I guess, for each of the stories.
So, The Idiot, I will give it an 8.5. It's a very cruel story, but at the same time shows the situation of Japan and of the people living in it, even if it's rather brushed with the descriptions. And I'd say uh, A Woman and the War, it's 8 minus. It's way more interesting, but at the same time, it's a bit more difficult to understand. And the ending, I felt it was a bit too, I wouldn't say preachy, but we're trying to understand parts of a character that weren't explored at all until the last moment, and it felt a bit out of place. But I can understand that finishing such a story is not easy.
Hmm. I would give the idiot an 8 out of 10. And One Woman and the War a 6.5 out of 10. I just didn't feel like it was that good as a story. Really.
No, the
Um,
story itself, I would say yes, it's not that good, but I really liked how he portrayed this darkness inside of the character. That's what redeems it. In a sense, it shows this ugliness, and he doesn't justify it; he just reveals it for what it is.
mm, mm. Okay then. Next week, you're gonna talk about um Junichiro Tanzaki's what was it called
Mhm.
again?
In Praise of Shadows.
And we'll compare that with Ango Sakaguchi's a personal view of Japanese culture, which I'm just going
I
to
remember already reading just the beginning. Much about this, but here is my okay.
yeah, it's like
Okay, boomer.
yeah, yeah,
No, just kidding.
yeah. I mean, did you start reading it because yeah, it begins with like I don't know anything about Japanese culture. If I remember correctly.
However,
Yeah. Um,
it is why I think this and that. For example, I'm rereading right now Taki's essay, and it's quite interesting. Uh, I found him a little bit too romantic in a sense, a bit too idealistic, but he admits it. So at least he's not being completely oblivious about his biases, which is admirable for someone writing about his own culture.
um,
Because of course we are blinded by certain aspects of it one way or another.
what did you say that you were rereading?
In Praise of Shadows,
Oh, Impress of Shadows. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, the short essay that we got next week
yeah. I mean,
by Tanizaki.
I thought it was a very good essay, a very,
It is, absolutely.
you know, one of the things which I did wonder though, like is this stuff about shadows like real or not? Like,
Well, this is the thing. It's something like because it talks about a time that probably doesn't exist anymore, or it's relegated to um, s- smaller corners of the country or tourist attractions, which is kind of sad because the way he describes it, you get a really good picture of how they may have looked like. But well, we'll have time next week for sure to talk about this. So I'd say those two short stories worth reading, absolutely. Even just to see two different points of view about a similar event and see how how different people reacted to it, described through different characters. Because I'm sure this one is based on Sakaguchi's personal experience and also on people he met in real life after these events.
yeah, if you're going to read one, just read The Idiot. Um,
Yes, yes, that one I say it's really worth it. The other, it's interesting to see it mostly in contrast with the idiot. It's like an addendum. If you can and you wish, for sure, read the idiot first and A Woman and the War second.
as I said when we were talking about when we were talking about Sakura no Mori, in the forest
Mm-hmm.
under the
Yeah,
blossom.
the
Yeah.
cherry trees in full
Uh,
blossom.
yeah. I think I said that Sakaguchi seems like a very flexible writer.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and as an example, I said let's look at this thing called the idiot, and I think yeah, I was proven right about that. Okay.
No, no, absolutely. You can say that you can feel that it's written by the same person at the same time. It's different enough that you understand how good it is. him as a writer and his writing as a proof of his talent.
Hmm. All right then. Thank you for listening. And Get Out. I still haven't come up with my own original thing, but who cares? Nobody's
In
listening
time.
in time, right?